The voicemail landed at 7:42 p.m. My father's voice clipped and cold, like he was reading from a business memo. Don't bother coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. 18 words. That was all. Most people would expect tears. Maybe anger. Maybe disbelief. But I didn't feel any of that. I just stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and felt an odd stillness. Like a truth I had been bracing for had finally been spoken out loud. For years, I had carried the quiet weight of being the invisible one, the daughter who signed the papers, held the numbers, kept the lights on while my brother played the air, and now, the silence was official. I didn't argue, I didn't beg, I just typed 2 words back to him. Understood. Because sometimes the cleanest break isn't the one you fight, it's the one you accept. And then outgrow. Warren Lane liked to tell people he built Lane Autocare with his bare hands. Brick by brick, until it became a regional name. What he didn't say was that he built his family the same way, brick by brick. Rule by rule, with no cracks allowed for softness. To him, children weren't individuals, they were replacements. Potential successors in a dynasty where loyalty meant obedience and invisibility was the price of survival. Rhett, my older brother, was the one who always fit the image he wanted. He was 3 years older. Bold, reckless, the kind of man who could walk into a room with his shirt half tucked and still be called a visionary. He had charm, swagger, and the same untouchable arrogance Warren respected in himself. Mistakes rolled off his back like water. Every debt, every missed deadline, every oversight was smoothed over with a laugh. And my father always let him slide. Me? I was the clipboard, the one who showed up early, balanced the books, and kept the lights on when Rhett forgot to pay the bills. By 12, I was logging tire shipments into QuickBooks. By 16, I was running payroll on spring break while my classmates were at the beach. Nobody asked if I wanted to, it was simply assumed I would. It didn't come with thanks. It didn't even come with acknowledgement. Just a silent expectation that my life existed to fill whatever cracks my father and brother left behind. My mother, Lynette, wasn't cruel, but she was complicit. She played her role as hostess, smiling at staff dinners, folding invoices into envelopes, setting plates at the table, then whispering to me afterward, "Be grateful, sweetheart, your father is building something for us." She thought she was softening the blow, but all it really did was cement the message. Gratitude was owed. But recognition would never come. I studied hard. I earned my MBA from Harvard. I had an offer waiting in Chicago with a corporate logistics firm that saw my value before I'd even finished the program. But Warren leaned on me with his favorite line, family before ambition. He said Rhett was focusing on vision and someone needed to focus on everything else. So I turned down the offer. I stayed. When the business needed a $2.5 million expansion loan, the bank required a secondary signer with impeccable credit. Rhett's numbers were trashed. Warren refused to put his personal assets at risk. The papers landed in front of me, pen uncapped. No speech, no thank you, just assumption. I signed. Somewhere deep down, I told myself it was loyalty. That maybe if I gave enough, they would finally see me as part of the plan. Not just the backup. But nothing changed. No gratitude, no acknowledgement, just another silent line in a ledger they expected me to keep balancing. That loan, which I had guaranteed with my name, became the foundation of their empire's next phase. And I was expected to keep moving, keep working, keep invisible. That was the rhythm of my life. Rhett the golden boy with endless second chances. And me the invisible engine who never stalled. The pattern was so ingrained that even when cracks showed, when I flagged duplicate invoices, when I saw consulting fees with no deliverables, I was brushed off. Rhett laughed. Warren dismissed. My mother urged me not to make trouble. Gaslighting packaged as guidance. Silence packaged as love. I began to understand that in their world, loyalty was never going to earn belonging. It was just another tool. Another brick in the wall Warren had built around himself. They didn't need me to shine. They needed me to stay quiet. To co-sign. To be reliable without being seen. And for years, I played that role, convincing myself that invisibility was a kind of safety. maybe even a kind of love. But deep down, I knew better. Invisibility is not love, it's erasure. And I was about to learn just how far my family was willing to take it. The first cracks didn't sound like shattering glass. They sounded like laughter. Rhett's laughter. I had flagged a vendor invoice. $12 billed 3 times over 3 months. A mistake, I thought. Something any competent manager would want fixed. But when I brought it up in a quarterly budget meeting, Rhett waved it off like lint on his collar. That's from a friend of mine. Let it slide. I looked at my father, waiting for even a flicker of disapproval. Instead, he sipped his coffee, not a muscle moving in his jaw. His only words cut sharper than silence. Focus on bigger things. Harper, stop acting like an outsider. Outsider. After everything I had carried, leases negotiated, payroll balanced, supply chains patched during shortages, that single word sank beneath my skin like ice. From that day, the erosion wasn't subtle anymore. My access to the company's systems began to vanish. One login at a time. First vendor platforms, then the financial dashboard. Even the company credit card tied to my name expired quietly and was never replaced. Each time I asked why, I was told, restructuring, or temporary system changes. Meanwhile, Rhett's office was upgraded with a standing desk and a chair worth more than my first car. He bragged about a company-paid trip to Vegas. Labeled, Leadership Summit. It wasn't incompetence. It was preparation. They were building a door. And it only opened one way, out. That's when my instinct shifted. Not to fight loudly, but to watch, to collect, to record. I started forwarding copies of invoices to my personal email, saving PDFs of internal memos, and cataloging every questionable entry into a private folder on my home computer. I called it the shadow ledger. At first, it felt paranoid, but each week, the folder grew thicker. Consulting fees without reports. Duplicate repairs billed across locations. Marketing, tests, with no campaigns attached. When Rhett signed client emails with my initials, I saved those too, piece by piece. The shape of something deliberate began to emerge. One evening, I reached out to Danielle Keller, a former classmate from law school. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew she'd helped her sister navigate a brutal divorce involving hidden assets. I showed her some of what I had gathered, careful not to reveal everything at once. Her advice wasn't loud, it was measured, almost surgical. Don't scream, don't warn them, just move the brick holding up their wall, and let it fall. Her words echoed in me. For the first time, I realized this wasn't about proving I was right in their eyes. It was about proving I was safe in my own. The breaking point came in the most mundane way. A credit summary I almost ignored. Buried in the report was a line item, Lane Holdings Deferred Payment Review. Lane Holdings was supposed to be a dormant shell corporation my father used for real estate years ago. Curious, I traced it, and that's when the ground shifted. The $2.5 million expansion loan, the one I had co-signed with my spotless credit, was 3 payments behind. The business was on the edge of default. And in every communication with creditors, my name was the shield they held up to buy time. Not Rhett's, not Warren's, mine. The irony was suffocating. I hadn't seen a financial statement in months. Hadn't been invited to a board meeting since last fall. I was already excluded from decision-making. Yet I was still the collateral propping up their empire. They had erased me from the business but kept my signature alive long enough to protect themselves. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the shadow ledger open beside me. The pages were no longer random fragments, they were a mosaic of deceit. Vendor fraud, personal expenses disguised as business costs. My name tied to obligations I had no control over. I knew then this wasn't mismanagement, it was orchestration. So I met Danielle again. This time in person. I laid the evidence out on the table between us. Line by line, she studied each page quietly before looking up. You're not listed as a guarantor, she said finally. I blinked. Meaning what? Meaning they used your name to secure the loan. But you're not legally bound if you withdraw before restructuring. You don't owe them protection anymore. Her words landed like a gavel in my chest. For the first time, The possibility of escape felt real. My silence had been their safety net. But silence could also become my weapon. When I walked out of that coffee shop, I wasn't trembling anymore. I was steady, carrying the shadow ledger in my bag and Danielle's advice in my ears. My family thought they could erase me while still using my name as leverage. But now, I had both the receipts and the strategy. And I was done being invisible. It took less than 5 minutes. But it felt like cutting the last thread of a rope that had bound me for years. I logged into the loan portal using the administrative credentials I had created back when my access was still full. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I simply clicked Remove Co-Applicant. Uploaded the withdrawal affidavit Danielle and I had drafted weeks earlier. And entered my PIN. The page flickered once. Then a gray line appeared at the bottom. Update received. Processing pending compliance review. No alarm. No fanfare. Just a quiet liberation in black and white text. The bank's reaction was faster than I imagined. Within hours, Lane Holdings' operating account was frozen. Vendors were flagged. An internal review initiated. For the first time, the empire my father had built didn't rest on my shoulders. It buckled on its own. The calls started before midnight. First my mother, her voice breaking on voicemail. Sweetheart. What happened? Your father says the bank froze everything. Did you sign something? Then Rhett, furious. What the hell did you do? We could have handled this internally. I stared at his message. Thought about every time he had mocked my caution. And typed back 2 words. I removed my name. By morning, there were nearly 80 missed calls. My father, usually so composed, left one message that bordered on desperation. You think you're punishing us, Harper, but you're punishing the legacy your grandfather built. But I knew the truth. Grandpa built a garage. Warren turned it into a dictatorship. The invitation came 2 days later, dinner at Leona's. The restaurant where we had once celebrated birthdays with balloons and cheap sparkling cider. This time, no cake, no candles, just a private room with a fireplace. 3 stiff figures waiting at one end of the table. I arrived 15 minutes late. On purpose. Gray slacks, black blouse, hair tied back neatly. Danielle's words played in my mind. Power doesn't shout. It arrives without apology. Rhett stood when I entered. Phone still in his hand. Thanks for coming. I sat without acknowledging him. I didn't come for you. Warren leaned forward, eyes sharp but voice measured. The same tone he used with stubborn suppliers. You've made your point, loud and clear. No, I said, calmly. The bank made my point. I just stopped protecting your lie. The silence that followed was thick. My mother shifted in her chair, looking anywhere but at me. Rhett scoffed. We gave you everything, Harper. I met his gaze. You gave me a job, not a voice. Warren tried again, dropping his tone into something almost conciliatory. This doesn't have to get ugly. We can work out an arrangement, quietly. No auditors, no headlines. You step back, and we move forward as a family. I pulled a sealed envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. Inside was the affidavit confirming my permanent withdrawal from the company loan, along with flagged reports of fraud and vendor discrepancies. That's my arrangement, I said. No more signatures, no more silence. It's your mess now. Rhett's composure cracked first. He slammed a fist against the table, his voice rising. You're destroying us over ego. I didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. I simply sat still, letting his anger crash against my calm. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just removing the illusion that I was ever part of it. For the first time in my life, my father didn't have a script ready. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, jaw tight. Finally, he whispered a single word I had never expected to hear from him. Please. I stood, gathering my bag. You told me not to come to the reunion, I said, voice steady. I'm just agreeing with you, formally. And with that, I left them in the flickering light of the fireplace, surrounded by papers they could no longer bury and a silence they could no longer command. The morning after that dinner at Leona's, I woke up to silence. No buzzing phone, no voicemails waiting to be played on loop. Just sunlight through my apartment blinds and the weight of decision that had already been made. I poured coffee, opened my laptop, and uploaded the last packet of evidence I had been compiling for months, the affidavit of withdrawal, the flagged vendor invoices, and a signed tip letter addressed to the state auditor's office. I didn't write it with venom. I wrote it with precision. Every number lined up, every duplicated invoice circled, every fraudulent signature marked. It wasn't an accusation, it was a record. Proof that I had carried the truth even when they tried to bury me under silence. By noon, the ripples started. The bank officially withdrew support from Lane Holdings. Their operating account, already frozen, remained locked while compliance flagged irregularities. Within a day, creditors began calling in favors that could no longer be extended on the basis of my clean credit. For once, their safety net wasn't me. It was gone. The panic found its way back into my phone in waves. Rhett's frantic texts, Warren's clipped voicemails, my mother's trembling voice asking what I wanted. But this time I didn't pick up. The choice wasn't between anger and reconciliation anymore. The choice was between living in their shadow or stepping fully into my own light. I had already made it. The first local headline appeared 3 days later. Lane Auto Care faces financial turmoil amid internal disputes. A small Business Digest piece. Nothing splashy, but enough to plant the story in print. Enough to make what I had lived through no longer a private wound, but a documented reality. For a family obsessed with reputation, that single paragraph hit harder than any confrontation could. And for me, it was closure. I didn't return to the office. I didn't argue for a share of the company I had held up for years. Instead, I sat in my small loft downtown, the city humming just outside my windows, and opened a new file on my laptop. Not Lane Auto Care, not spreadsheets for expansion plans. A consulting plan, one designed for women-led startups, especially those clawing their way past dismissive investors and silent sabotage. I had lived that silence. I knew the traps, and I was ready to help others sidestep them. The work grew faster than I expected. Within a month, I had 3 clients, small, scrappy, ambitious, and unapologetically building without permission. I recognized the fire in their eyes because I had seen it in my own reflection too many nights. Sitting alone with a stack of papers and a quiet determination to survive. It was in the middle of this rebirth that the final twist landed. A plain white envelope appeared in my mailbox, stamped with the bank's logo. No note, no flourish, just a single-page letter. This letter confirms that the commercial loan associated with Harper Lane has been formally withdrawn and restructured. No further obligation remains. I sat at my desk and read it twice. Then a third time, not because I didn't understand, but because it felt like a resurrection on paper. The legal death they had tried to assign me, bound by contracts, controlled by silence, was officially gone. My name was mine again. I slid the letter into a folder marked complete and tucked it into the back of my cabinet. Then I lit a candle by the window. The city below glowing with life I finally felt part of again. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's replacement or someone's scapegoat. I wasn't the invisible daughter who signed to keep the lights on. I was simply Harper, visible, whole, free. And as the night settled in, I poured a glass of wine, opened a new client proposal, and whispered the words I had carried like armor through it all. Sometimes you don't need revenge. Sometimes survival itself is the victory. The city was quiet that evening. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty but earned. I sat by the tall window of my new loft in Portland, a glass of red wine in hand. My laptop open to fresh beginnings. The evidence boxes were stacked neatly in the corner. Not reminders of war but proof of survival. Outside, the lights of the city blinked like 1,000 small affirmations that life goes on. Even when family tries to write you out of it. They had wanted silence, obedience, absence, and they got all 3. But I thrived in that silence. I built something that was mine alone. Without their control, without their permission. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it doesn't scream, it echoes. In frozen accounts, revoked loans, and the quiet knowledge that the truth can no longer be hidden. Betrayal didn't end me. It ended the illusion that I needed their approval to exist. And in that ending, I finally found freedom. So if you've ever felt erased, discarded, or reduced to nothing more than someone else's shadow. Remember this. You are not difficult. You are simply visible now. And visibility is power. If this story resonates with you, share your own experience in the comments. I want to hear from those who faced manipulation, injustice, or betrayal and found a way forward. And if you want more true stories of hard-won victories, boundaries defended, and justice revealed, subscribe to this channel. Because survival is just the beginning.